truly don't know how true what I'm about to show you guys is, but let me just go ahead and say this. Given the fact that it's the state of Oregon, given the fact that Portland is a city in the state of Oregon, given the fact that the state of Oregon has decriminalized a lot of things that would normally be criminalized, it does not surprise me that this greater Idaho movement officially
in the state of Oregon, someone can walk up to your 2-year-old kid completely bare naked, and that's not a crime, even if it's on your property.
Correct. Well, so it's trespassing, but what I'm saying is there's no laws against the actual nudity portion of it.
So you can expose yourself to children in Oregon.
Again, if you're not doing it for sexual gratification or the gratification of somebody else, yes, you are allowed to walk around in public naked.
On private property, this is where I live, and someone just came and exposed themselves to my 2-year-old boy, and this officer's saying that it's not a crime. So a naked person came up onto my property here, approached my 2-year-old kid, completely naked, which I ran over to him and covered his eyes so he wouldn't see. My obvious thought is to call 911 as someone's indecently exposing themselves to my child on my property. At what point did this become a normal and acceptable thing to do? The cops will literally do nothing about it. They're basically saying we have to wait for that person to do something more serious to your kid before we can...
I chose to show you something else besides the news clip that you guys are about to see from News Nation. But the greater Idaho thing has been going on for a while. Basically, what's happened is that people who live in central and eastern Oregon and even some parts of western Oregon have said, you know what, I don't want to be a part of this state no more, or I don't want to live under these very, very radical liberal policies. I mean, the state of Oregon, even though they recently, and I mean recently, and this happened in the city of Portland. Guys, forgive me if I script the language from time to time, especially saying city versus state. It seems to me like Oregon itself is just a great big giant liberal crap hole, and their citizens that are, let's just say, right of center and even in the center are actually suffering from it. I'm not doing this video to insult the state of Oregon. I'm doing this to kind of show you guys exactly what's kind of going on in this country, because we did recently have an example of this that did, in fact, go through out of the state of Louisiana that occurred a few months ago that I just did not cover. But we're going to talk a little bit about that in this video here to kind of explain exactly what's going on and how much more frequent we may see this become. But the point is this right here. Portland, Oregon recently elected a tough-on-crime Republican. My response to that would be good luck, because Portland, with Antifa, the amount of people who live in Portland, all the left-wingers, it seems to swamp the rest of the state. One could also argue that this is a great argument for state electoral college, which, by the way, I'll talk about a little bit later on in the course of this video. It's going to be a relatively lengthy one. Of course, this video is going to be coming out on Friday because I got a doctor's appointment on Thursday, and I'm obviously making it here on Wednesday, but it's a topic that I've been wanting to get to for a while. So bear with me really quick. It's going to be a relatively lengthy video. The fact of the matter is this right here. People who live east of Portland, and I would even argue possibly 2 or 3 counties over, they've gotten tired of this, so they formed this movement, the Greater Idaho Movement. Now, the state of Idaho, they have not exactly fully approved this, not their legislative body, but as you guys can see, there are obviously efforts to break away from the much, much more liberal, much, much more blue areas of the nation. It just so happens to be that the vast majority of the blue areas in the United States just happen to be on the coast, so it makes me wonder if this area is not going to become a trend someday. But before we get deep into this, let's go ahead and kind of look at this first bit of this news, and then we're going to come back on the other end and further break down exactly why this area is actually happening.
The movement for parts of eastern Oregon to secede and join the state of Idaho is getting a lot of action online. It's gaining more steam following this week's election there. Right now, 13 counties have voted in support of the break. Residents say they're fed up with liberal policies like being seen in Portland, Oregon. Rural areas do not believe or agree with the city's politics there. And if the secession happens, Oregon's border would move 200 miles to the west, making the state of Idaho bigger. Stephanie Haynes joining us live right now. Stephanie, these counties have been pushing for this for quite some time, and it's all kind of coming to a head. I remember interviewing someone who leads this movement, I want to say a year and a half ago. What are the odds that this could happen?
Before I go through 46 seconds to respond to all that, I just want to go ahead and say this right now. If you caught the very, very beginning of the clip, you'll probably see that a bunch of people were obviously murdered. Obviously, they're just reporting on that right there. Obviously, it happened somewhere else, probably Chicago, because the fact it is News Nation, it is WGN. But still, at the same time, though, this type of stuff right here is kind of becoming a bit of a regular occurrence in Portland, Oregon. Now, the thing is this right here. Portland is the hotbed for Antifa. And of course, if you guys are familiar with that, then you would know that Antifa, for the most part, pretty much got away with just about anything when Trump was in office. And they pretty much got away with just about anything during Obama's second term. They've actually been around for a pretty long while. And of course, they've been quieted recently, but still at the exact same time, the activities that were going on in Portland through Antifa were still going on, and they're still going on at this moment in time. They're just nowhere near as reported, especially here online. It's kind of gotten to the point where people have kind of gotten desensitized to it because it is, in fact, the city of Portland. And obviously, the city of Portland resides in the state of Oregon. Well, Oregon has been a heavily Democratic area for a very long time, for the exception of East Oregon and Central Oregon. It makes you almost wonder about certain states. Like we'll say the state of New York, for example. New York City is the most liberal area, but of course, if you go upstate, it begins to get a little bit more conservative. Of course, Albany is the exception to the rule, and Buffalo is also a bit of an exception too. However, if you actually look at the overall vote totals from 2016 and 2020, there's actually been a bit of a shift in Erie County, New York. It's actually suggesting that maybe that area could be becoming a little bit redder, but that's a different topic for a different day. Same thing with the state of Illinois. Chicago is primarily the liberal area. It's an extremely large population center, and therefore it does, in fact, swamp the rest of the state. And in a lot of ways, it even controls the policies of said state and said living environments. One of the main reasons why it is, I tell people all the time, it starts at the state and local level. But, of course, over time, the state of Oregon, getting back to them, they've been shifting further and further and further to the left. I think the last time it voted Republican in an election was 2000 when Bush won, and a lot of that right there could have even been contributed to Ralph Nader being the third-party candidate. I'm not entirely sure, but I'm just simply saying that this was the last time it voted Republican. Still, the point is this right here. The people who live in the state of Oregon, they've had to deal with all kinds of crazy stuff since this very, very hardcore left-wing government has taken over, and it's only gone further and further to the left. Examples include the decriminalization of drug possession and drug use, especially in Portland. We'll talk about that here in a second because these people did, in fact, have to backtrack on that, but we'll get to that here in a minute. Also, something else, too, and I even reported, or at least did a video on it, this channel here, that at one point in time, the homeless people in the city of Portland were allowed to stay in people's lawns, and the people who own the homes, who own the yard itself, were not allowed to remove these people. Now, you guys obviously saw the very, very first clip, and it may remind some people watching this video here of some other crazy draconian laws that happen in other states. I want to say that it was Tim Pool who stated on his channel that back when he lived in southern New Jersey had a law, and please, if you're from New Jersey, correct me if I'm wrong, New Jersey had a law that basically said that you were not allowed to defend your home. You actually had to allow the person, the intruder, to get inside your home, and you actually had to abandon said home or go outside the house and go in the backyard before you could even do anything. And as I've said before, even though the law may say that you can defend your home once you're inside your backyard, is the burglar going to go into the backyard to possibly get shot? Chances are they probably aren't. Kind of defeats the purpose of defending your home in that state, if you ask me. It seems to be like the law actually does a lot more to protect the criminal than it does the actual victim itself. We've been seeing a lot of that recently. Of course, after a while of dealing with these types of policies, guess what's going to happen? You're going to get pissed off, and you're probably going to get politically active. Let's watch some more.
Yeah, well, right now it's still pretty much an uphill battle because the reporting shows that it's going to have to be approvals from both state legislatures, right, from both Oregon and Idaho, and then this approval from Congress. But as you said, it's really resonating. The story of it is really resonating because, like you said, it's the people of Eastern Oregon who are more conservative in their values, who are fed up and want to leave and break from the more liberal policies of their fellow statesmen from the West, where Portland is. And it's particularly over policies when it comes to crime, when it comes to taxes. Here's this proposed border. You can see how much the border would move 200 miles to the west towards the ocean there and make this movement called Greater Idaho. As you said, been going on for years, this effort to move state lines. So
liberal policies, liberal sensibilities. People, quite frankly, can't take anymore. Now, whether the state of Idaho actually welcomes people in, I really and truly don't know. But let's go back to one more policy in particular. I did a video a while back that would feature Chael Sonnen. He did an interview on Patrick Bet David podcast. And, of course, he was talking about if he became the governor, he would probably deputize the Mongols and the pagans, stuff like that. There's stuff that, quite frankly, is just for the most part rhetoric. But still, the point is this right here. He brought up the fact that Portland was regretting or at least Oregon was regretting the recent drug policy, basically decriminalizing it. I mean, just take a look at this crap.
The first of its kind law aimed to transform drug use, even in public, from a crime to a behavioral health issue.
It's gone from like property crimes to stolen cars, and for the last year or so, year and a half, it's been predominantly fentanyl, where fentanyl has basically become our full-time job.
There's no magic wand that is going to somehow solve the drug crisis. It just doesn't exist.
Now Oregonians are thinking twice. As public drug use has risen, residents are asking, was decriminalization a massive mistake, or did they just open the floodgates too quickly?
If you're interested in maybe detox, there's really not much detox beds available. But
there's a lot more drugs there than detox centers. It's almost like the state of Oregon is saying that we don't want these people to exist anymore. That's basically what they're doing. Of course, liberals will then turn right back around and tell you that this right is kind of these people's natural state. And of course, if they're not held accountable or not bothered by the law, then they eventually will become better people, which has never always been, let's just put it this way here, that's never been proven to be true. It's kind of the same principles that these people had during the French Revolution, but of course we saw how that happened. But let us watch the rest of this report, and let me tell you what's probably going to happen as a result of this going forward.
Lind reports that voters in Idaho, have yet to really make a vote on this. But last year, the state's House of Representatives approved a measure that would allow lawmakers from both states to engage in formal discussions.
How do you go from these non-binding votes that counties say, hey, this might be a good idea, to actually joining Idaho?
Yeah, so any two states can change where their border's at. And there's a process for that, and it's called the Interstate Compact. So any two state legislatures of bordering states can move the border to where it actually makes sense.
Okay, so obviously there are people out there who do think that this is not a good idea. There have been people who have voiced their opposition, including one of Oregon's Democratic senators. And then on a more practical level, there are critics who say, there's a lot to play into moving to another state. When it comes to taxes, social policies, jobs, there's a lot to get figured out, even if this, in theory does go through. Adrian.
All right, Stephanie, thank you so much.
Now, here's the thing. This right here, in my opinion, is something that a lot of people desire, but it's not necessarily going to happen in every single instance. I don't think the state of Illinois is going to be able to separate itself from Chicago, or Chicago be able to separate itself from the state of Illinois. I don't think that New York City's 5 boroughs are going to be able to separate any more than what they are. And I don't think that the state of New York is going to be able to separate from the city of New York. Same thing with Baltimore, from Maryland, that type of stuff there. I just don't see that type of stuff happening on a large scale going forward. And of course, you've always got those grifters out there who love to talk about the CW phrase. And by the way, I'm not going to lie to you, I've talked about it before too, but I'll talk more about that towards the end, because as I've said before, if anything was to happen in this country, it would probably happen in the bigger cities. It wouldn't be red on blue, it would be blue on blue, because of the identity politics factor. I mean, these people's interests don't exactly mesh. However, before I go any further, and speaking about identity politics, that right there comes to the next example, the example I wanted to use. This right here was a story that, quite frankly, I regretted not covering, and now I'm using it as an example to kind of show you guys what's probably going to happen in the future, at least on the small town scale. You guys know about the state of Louisiana? Well, the state of Louisiana has 2 marquee cities. Well, really, it's 3. Actually, it's really 4. But still, at the same time, the largest city is what? New Orleans. It's the most famous city. You got Lafayette, and then you got the capital, Baton Rouge. Let me play this news report to kind of remind you guys what happened.
Louisiana's highest court sent its ruling down, paving the way. Louisiana's highest court sent its ruling down, paving the way for St. George to officially become its own city.
That's right. Deshaun Johnson is live in downtown Baton Rouge with reaction on this decision. Good evening, Deshaun.
Yeah, Renee and Jacob, this has been a decision going on for years. And earlier today, the ruling for St. George to officially be incorporated as its own city was approved after a 4-3 vote from the Louisiana Supreme Court. The justices found that legal error led to lower courts denying the incorporation, and the lower court's judgment was reversed. The city's incorporators and electors won the judgment requested. St. George incorporators were taken to court following a 2019 election that was approved, allowing the city to be created. Prior court court ruling sided with Baton Rouge, denying the creation of the new city before the decision by the state Supreme Court. Here's the reaction on the.
Basically, what happened was that the suburbanites, the white people, and of course even some black people who had some money, got tired of the school system failing. They got tired of the police department failing. They got tired of the crime. They got tired of videos being posted to social media of kids getting beat up. And they said, you know what, screw this right here. We don't want our taxpayer dollars going to this. But what do you think people did when the Supreme Court, or actually the state of Louisiana, their court system approved the actual move? What do you think they did? Well, let's watch this next part, and I'll give you guys an idea and explain exactly what really happened after this decision went through.
Serving the residents of St. George, just as I served those of Baker, Central, and Zachary. And in the days ahead, I will proceed to have conversations to determine the best course of action in compliance with the court's final decision.
We are open for everyone. If you want more opportunity, you want a better life, you want a chance for lower crime, St. George, I don't care what you look like. No one does. No one ever did. That's a narrative that was created as a smokescreen to rally people into a cause. It's never been true.
People like Roland Martin, the race hustlers, they came out here and what did they do? They screamed that these people were racist. That's what they did. They screamed that these people were racist whites. Even though there are other videos out there of these people complaining that people with money were leaving. It's very, very funny how these people's brains operate. You see, these people have this thing about them where they feel that they are allowed to separate from you, but you're not allowed to separate from them. I mean, you want to be left alone, right? I mean, I'm not advocating for what's happening here, but of course you guys can obviously see people got tired of their taxpayer dollars going to pay for crap. They got tired of it. So what did they do? They filed a lawsuit to separate, and this courts said, hey, look, you guys can take off, no big deal, no issue, go form your own place. And you know, the people who actually form this new place, they're even being welcoming to the people, which, by the way, I would not be welcoming to them at all. I would tell them to stay right where the hell they are because they're the ones who voted for this squalor, so therefore they can live in it. Which brings me to the next point. One of my favorite commentators here on this platform, and I think he took down his main channel and put it on Rumble and Rumble exclusively and BitChute, but his channel Black Pigeon Speaks still exists. Now, obviously, I'm doing everything I can to avoid copyright here. I'm borrowing it from him. But he made an extremely good point about that whole CW phrase. And of course, right there towards the end, you're probably going to think to yourself, okay, what was the point of saying what I'm about to say? But it kind of does, in a lot of ways, signal exactly what's going on in the U.S., at least as far as going forward.
Percent of the country wants and demands is largesse, more bread and more circuses. They're not interested in a civil war. Now, what is absolutely much more probable is a civil conflict, and that a civil conflict could take place within states or between states, and the actions would be something similar to the troubles in Northern Ireland. For example, especially during an acute and prolonged economic crisis that does look to be on the foreseeable future. I myself see the future in much the same way as a mid-5th century Roman would, as he looked out and surveyed his crumbling empire. An empire that was busy tearing itself apart from within, rather than making arrangements for a mutually beneficial future. Does that sound at all familiar? But by no means are these black pills. In fact, I believe this video is one gigantic white pill, because the end of a thing is only the beginning of something new.
And Felix, at the end of that, if you guys caught all that, and I'll link the full video in the description box, he would then go on to say that what he felt was going to happen was exactly what I'm about to tell you. People would eventually move to like-minded areas. People would want to flee areas that, quite frankly, that are not like-minded. For example, you had the whole situation after Roe v. Wade was overturned. You had people claiming that they were going to leave Florida because now abortion was basically, which it wasn't, but still at the same time, though, that type of stuff there. You get people like, say, Gavin Newsom saying, well, I'm going to tax anybody who comes. It's stuff like that there. That right there is more than likely where you're going to get petty type crap. However, civil conflict was also something else too that was mentioned in a bit, because the bit was originally over 2 minutes long. I was almost going to include the entire bit, but I chose not to. I just figured I would just kind of fill it in with my own commentary. Basically, what he assessed was that you wouldn't have a civil war. You would have something like, say, civil strife, which I think is more likely, and I think it would obviously occur more in the cities. Now, at this moment in time, you're seeing Kevin O'Leary on the Piers Morgan episode. I told you I was going to keep this clip. And of course, he doesn't really spend a whole lot of time talking about it in that particular episode, but one of the things that he talked about was the situation going on in New York City with the Trump legal cases. And of course, also, it wasn't just the Trump illegal case, it was also the Ejon Carroll case, all that type of stuff there. Just cases that were based mostly on BS and crap. And of course, you got people like the governor, Kathy Hochul, saying stuff like, well, we're just making an example of him. No. Business investors, people who create business stuff, they don't want to be in a state like that. They don't want to be in an environment like that. Well, take a wild guess at the state that's probably one of the worst ones for business environment at this moment in time. The state of Portland. Nobody wants to start a business in a state that has got drugs basically decriminalized. I mean, Cracker Barrel of all places live. Right now in California, you've got at Oakland especially, you've got 7-Eleven leaving. You just saw that earlier today. You've got restaurants leaving. Taco Bell. Restaurants have shut down the drive-through. They've actually shut down the indoor dining. And by the way, we're going to be talking about fast food a little bit later on this week, probably on Saturday, or maybe it may even be out on Friday. I may do the Dr. Phil one on Friday, but still, at the same time, though, businesses are closing down and they're leaving. Of course, it's economical reasons, but the other reason that's cited is, in fact, crime, degradation altogether. It looks to me like the people who live in the state of Oregon, especially East Oregon, said, you know what, enough is enough. I want to try to get the hell out of here. And of course, the state of Oregon will not allow them to just up and do it. So what do? Let's try to get a movement together and let's try to join another state. Now, back to Kevin O'Leary. And this right here is concerning a lot of people on the political scale, because obviously states like, say, Texas, for example, they're solidly red, but have been coming more and more purple over the years because the business coming in. My home state of North Carolina, we get Apple coming in here. I don't think that that's going to blow up an area the way you think, okay? But that's another topic for another day. The point is this right here. What O'Leary was basically saying was that you would see, and he's been very, very vocal about this, you would see a lot of people cancel projects in these very, very blue cities, these very, very big blue areas, and they would eventually leave. They would eventually get the hell out. They would eventually say, no, I'm sick and tired of this. I can't do this crap anymore. That right there is basically what it is, and you're going to go to much, much more business-friendly states. What's happening is a full-blown demographic shift. However, what you guys are seeing with the greater Idaho stuff is probably a sign of things to come. It has not fully gone through yet, but it could very, very well do so. So no, you're not looking at a CW. You're not looking at anything like that. You're looking at people leaving and running towards the hills, which, by the way, is Bible prophecy. You're looking more at people just trading places and getting out of areas where they're not welcomed. In some of these cities, they flat out tell you you are not welcome there. Think about that. Now, there is one thing I do want to say. There is one final thing that I want to go ahead and throw on out there. I don't have any clips or anything to back it up, but I just want you guys to just kind of listen to this last part. I've always believed that what ends up happening to the United States is that it becomes almost like the comic series, No Man's Land, which was a Batman comic. Gotham City becomes a great big giant crap hole after an earthquake, and of course you can't operate, and the criminals eventually take over. That right there is what it feels like to me is going on in America's cities, and of course it's also those porous prosecutors. Just a final thought. Please tell me what you guys think in the comment section. Please hit the like button. Please subscribe. Please share the video. Please sign off in the comment section, and I'll see you guys later.